All right, recording has started, and this is the October 17th, 2024 Crossplane community meeting. We got a bunch of stuff going on here to chat about today. So I'm going to, as usual, drop a link into the Zoom chat, which I think Ezgi may have just done, but for folks just joining now, you have a direct link here to the agenda document. And that will give you access to follow along on your own screen, but also you can go ahead and add suggestions to the agenda if there's anything that you all want to add to talk about that we're not already covering today. So let's see. I only have one screen today, so I know there's a bunch of stuff here. I'm just going to start accepting to get out of the way here. I think that there we go. Cool. That should be everything. All right. So let's talk about recent releases. We are in the last part of the v1.18 release cycle. So we haven't had a recent release of Crossplane since the 1.17.1 was the last patch release that we ran. I think that it would be a good idea to try to run a 1.17.2 patch release, actually. There aren't necessarily critical features that are unreleased right now, like the work that Nick had done to be able to use and install V1 functions packages into like using the X package tooling and then the package manager as well. I think that is something that would be useful for folks that have already gone and upgraded their functions to be using the V1 types, then the latest SDKs and all that jazz. That would be useful for folks so that we can just go ahead and get ahead of that. But also there's a Golang related version that needs to be bumped, excuse me, for related to security findings within certain versions of Golang. So we want to follow up on that potential security vulnerability and make sure that that's patched in all the releases that we are currently supporting right now too. So if there's no immediate objections to that, that's probably something that I'll just try to run, I guess maybe tomorrow, Friday here, to just kind of end out the week and get a 1.17.2, but also a 1.16 and a 1.15 patch as well out with just a security fix. Otherwise, though, we have coming up pretty soon here the 1.18 release dates. So currently it's still scheduled around November 5th. There's a few weeks left until that, and there's a lot of features in flight. So, as typical, we have a date that we're targeting, but, we are quality driven as well. So, making sure that we're getting things merged in and, issues and regressions and testing and all that jazz, making sure that's all going smoothly. That could change around that date a bit, but the current plans are targeting November 5th as the timeline there. You can follow along with it as well with the release issue. We've got that opened, and we'll keep updating that with progress as the release goes on. We'll update you on Slack and stuff like that. And then Mark stepped up to be our release manager this time. We talked about this, I think, in the last community meeting, that we're at a point where we could have release managers from the community step in and run a release and kind of just be the release manager to get a major Crossplane version out. So Mark has stepped up to do that for the first one here. And if anybody who ever wants to get involved with the release in the future, they're always welcome to, and just reach out to me anytime. All right. So a lot is going on in 1.18. A lot of stuff is in flight. A lot of stuff has been merged. Most of the stuff that's actually been merged recently, we have specific agenda items to talk about later on. So I think we can mostly skip over this stuff because we'll be talking about them in more details going on. And I think that actually applies as well to a recent design that Nick opened up just recently. We'll talk about that and some of the thinking around that and make sure that we're saving space for folks to weigh in on that one as well. So let's actually just kind of skip all this stuff because we're specifically addressing that in later specific agenda items. So let's just take a quick look at the 1.18 release board and see if there is anything. Let me get rid of all these windows here too. There we go. Let's see. So there's a couple of things on here that I'm hoping we can get to. One of the things that comes to my mind right away because I know that there's a lot of attention and eyeballs on a lot of this other stuff. But one of the things I definitely wanted to call out or flag, I don't think we have necessarily a solution for it, but I just wanted to raise a flag on it, is the design and work around running Crossplane on host networks that's specifically focused, intended to help with running like on like scenarios with EKS using a network plugin. There's been a design on how to expose that setting or expose ports and such for the various services across Plane, and I'm hoping that can get some traction before the release as well. So I'll just kind of throw that out there. I think this is I can't. I'm not logged in on the screen here, so I can't drag this, but I believe that there is a design open for that one. If there are folks that want to take a look at that and try to get that one towards the finish line as well. Other than that, though, folks that have been working on some of the big features, if you want to update any of these items on the board so that they are, in the right status reflecting them, that would be good. I think that most all this stuff we're addressing, we're in the thick of right now and trying to land as the release is getting closer to the date. So we still got a lot more to talk about later on. But any other thoughts about 118 or things that folks want to raise a hand on before we get too much closer to the release dates? All right. Well, let's move on then to some of the other sections then. All right. So there's the functions and providers ecosystem is still quite active, as you can tell. So there's a couple of interesting functions here that have had releases, as well as the typical providers that are pretty active, the major cloud provider ones. Markus, do you want to give a quick update on the function shell? I think you started that initiative, right? On the latest result of, release of function shell?
Yeah, so essentially what it can do now is it can assume a role and it can authenticate to an Amazon account without static credentials. And what it allows people to do is, for instance, enumerate resources. And it can then, and other functions can use that output to use it as input. Like for instance, if you needed all subnets or if you needed if you needed IAM roles or certain things. However, with that, um, I really urge people um, to only allow the function to do what they intended to do, because if the function was compromised and if it was not limited, it can do everything.
Well, Markus, and you've gotten some contributors that are starting to help out with that. I think Clement was helping out with that recently as well. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
Right
And
on.
that's much
Awesome.
appreciated.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Markus. And then Stephen, I think there's a function you started here as well, the tag manager, that's got a couple of new releases. And then I think there was actually an element down here later on in the agenda for talking about it too. Do you want to just go ahead talk real quick about the function tag manager and what it's focused on?
Yeah, it's basically a common use case here is to manage tags in a central way across lots of resources in AWS. Just we're starting with AWS, so this could either add tags to everything. You can ignore tags. Sometimes there's external systems like security systems that add tags to resources, so you could set it now to ignore. So those are the major features. The other thing too is that only about half of AWS resources actually support tags, so this will actually not apply tags to resources that don't support it. So that's basically what it does.
Well, and Stephen, I think a couple of weeks ago when you did the first release, you were looking for some additional testers and stuff. Are you still looking for folks to try it out and supply feedback, or have you gotten
Yep.
kind of like the initial first round in, or?
Yeah, we've gotten some testing to, we have some people testing it, but yeah, any testing would be great. It's still pretty early, I feel.
Cool.
But yeah.
Awesome. Nice. I definitely appreciate the vibrant extensions ecosystem amongst the Crossplane community here. Lots of cool stuff going on. Cool. And then a bunch of releases from the usual suspects of the big cloud providers for those. So nothing out of the unusual there. All right. Let's keep trucking along. So let's see. So community topic stuff. So content updated or recent videos, blogs, etc., podcasts that folks have been doing here. There's definitely a couple cool ones here. The Jason and the rest of the team at Macquarie, their engineering team, released a pretty cool blog post there about something they've been working on for a while. This the next generation cloud control plane that they're doing with Macquarie is not been something that they just did overnight. They've been putting a lot of thinking into it, and there's a pretty cool write-up of what they're doing. So I think that's definitely worth calling out. And then where was it? I think it was this one. Yes. I think I did not get a chance to see this whole one, but Jonas and Viktor did an interesting stream podcast sort of thing it's on YouTube, and talking about some of the day two operational concerns, and getting Viktor's opinion on a lot of like how to run Crossplane in production, etc. It was actually really, really cool what I've seen so far. I definitely want to finish that. It's on my watch later list to finish it, but the link is right here. And then I did also want to call out and as we had talked about, over the summer here, we did our Linux Foundations, the Cloud Native Computing Foundations mentorship program. And all the cool work that Ines had done on focusing mostly on validation, like the Crossplane CLI's validate command. And so he took the time to write up about his experience that he had this summer and kind of share that with the rest of the community and the broader cloud native ecosystem. So that's definitely worth taking a look as well. It's kind of cool to see what he got to do as a mentee, and some guidance for other folks that are getting started as well. Cool. And a couple other resources there. Thanks, Stephen, for adding that last one in there as well about Crossplane testing. I know that question comes up a lot in conversations that we have at KubeCons and stuff, so that'll definitely be a good resource for folks too. And speaking of conversations with folks, we tend to have a lot of those at KubeCon, which is such a great opportunity, hanging out at the booth and talking to, I don't know how many, but hundreds of people basically that come by and chat. It's super freaking cool. That is coming up very soon, actually. I think we will be in Salt Lake City at KubeCon before we have our next regularly scheduled meeting. So it's coming up fast. It's coming up soon. And there's a number of Crossplane talks there at that will be in Salt Lake City. I've got links here to check all those out directly and add them to your schedule. And then they did not talk about this directly before, so I wanted to call it out right now. But we are having a party. We're throwing a party with the kind of combining forces with the Dapr project. And so we'll be hanging out at this cool arcade place in Salt Lake City with lots of games to play and stuff like that. And the intent there is to kind of celebrate both of our pending upcoming graduations. So a bit of a countdown to graduation party. So there's a link in the agenda document here, and then there's a registration page to get your name on there if you wanna come by and hang out with us that night. I think it's Thursday night during KubeCon Salt Lake City week. So definitely come hang out with us and the Dapr folks, and I think that'll be a really fun time. KubeCon India is coming up as well. And there's a couple of talks there that I just wanted to throw some links at for anybody who's able to make it there. There's a couple of talks for folks mentioning and referencing what they're doing with Crossplane. So you can check out these directly here from the agenda document also. All right. So I think when we had the last community meeting, we had our latest SDK for Go released. But we followed up and got the Python one out as well. So both of these SDKs are now using V1 of the function APIs and RPCs. So if you update your function to use these new SDKs, you need to kind of bump up the versions that you're using for your imports for functions. It should pretty simple. It should be mostly a find and replace sort of thing. And once you update your function there, it is backwards compatible. So, your functions will continue working with previous versions of Crossplane that did not have the V1 types. So yeah, and let us know if there's any troubles with upgrading those, and we can take a look at that. I've done that on a couple different functions and projects already, and it was smooth for me as well.
Just a quick note that Python 1's actually already at V0.5.0.
Is it? I missed that one.
Yeah, there was like one little utility function added to it, not a Crossplane function, but a Python function that helps you write Crossplane functions. So it's very similar to 0.4.0, just added one little useful thing to it.
Yeah, I remember that now. Yeah, cool. Thanks, Nick. All right. Okay, and then we had a long-standing discussion on the future of provider GitHub, and I wanted to update folks with a conclusion to that on the long-term plan there. So basically, what had happened here is that there was a provider GitHub effort that had started a few years ago. It was very minimal and sparse in its implementation, and it was not receiving any further updates, and it was not active anymore, essentially. And then the good folks at Kubernetes, they made a provider for GitHub. It was public. Folks started to use it, and it proved to be quite useful. And so they very generously went ahead and donated it to the Crossplane Contrib organization. So there is now, part of the Crossplane Contrib, community ecosystem, set of providers, etc. There is a active GitHub provider there. So if folks want to be integrating and utilizing functionality related to GitHub and part of their platforms that they're building, then this is the the recommended provider to start using for that. There is a very simple, if you're already using it, there's a very simple process there of just basically switching the pointer to where to pick up the new package version from, and it's Crossplane Contrib home. Otherwise, it's it's just not a migration for API types or anything needed. So it's pretty simple to upgrade to that new version. And yeah, that is the provider GitHub that's recommended for folks going forward. So it's nice to get a conclusion to that. And then once again, thanks to Ezgi and the folks from Coexisting that went ahead and donated that to the community. All right, Stephen, we talked about this one already. So thanks again for the function tag manager that you've contributed as well. And folks are welcome to try that out and provide feedback. All right. So yeah, now we're getting into the bigger stuff that we save time for at the end here. So the environment config, the bump of the type to beta has been merged in, and the removal of native support in classic patch and transform has been removed. So we talked about this a little bit ago. We got a lot of feedback and discussions on it. And this has now been merged in, so it will be part of the 1.18 release. One thing that is going to be helpful here is that Philippe has already done some of the documentation for kind of how this change should be integrated and what the impact is, and how to basically start using environment config related stuff within functions. And then I don't think this has been done yet, but this is definitely needs to be part of the 1.18 release, is that the Crossplane beta convert command will be updated to automate any of the migration efforts, take a composition that was using classic patch transform environment config stuff, and then migrate it to something using functions and the new path forward for including environment config information. So check out this. I think one of the most useful links is going to be this one right here for the migration instructions. That's written in a bit of a future tense because not everything is completed there, but it's from the perspective of the 1.18 release, this will be the story. And so please do check that out. And I think that will be, I don't think there's other resources. That's probably the one that's going to be most helpful for integrating this change in with the 1.18 release. So that will be useful. Jacob, you're raising your hand.
I use the button and try to be polite. I had some questions around that. I can link to the discussion maybe in this doc. I tried to use environment configs with the patch and transform method, and it really wasn't obvious to me how to basically reference the environment config provided data when using patch and transform. Ultimately, I gave up and just switched to using Golang templating where there were obvious examples, but that's just a little bit of feedback. Like it's unclear if it's supported. If it isn't, maybe just like documenting it. I'll link to the discussion in the doc.
Yeah, that sounds great, Jacob. And that'll be useful definitely to see if what sort of difficulties around the experience other folks might be having. Thanks for sharing that. All right. So yeah, Nick, you are online, my friend. Do you want to go ahead and introduce this design that you opened very recently to take care of a situation that a lot of folks have run into, and it's nice to be able to have a solution for that going forward?
Yes, sure. So this design is happening at the last second, fortunately, before the release. As you can see there, it unblocks two use cases. One is one that we've talked about while there's been an issue tracking for a long time, which is frequently people mirror their packages to an internal registry for either security compliance reasons. You know, maybe they want to scan everything and fix the vulnerabilities or something in it, or just for like resiliency to make sure you don't have dependency on an external registry that you know you might get disconnected from or whatever, or you know maybe your site is not connected to the internet. This hasn't worked for a couple of reasons, mostly because the top level packages install fine, but the dependencies have not. We had a fairly basic way of installing dependencies. Hasan recently merged a design and a implementation that allows you to now specify credentials for packages, whether they're a dependency or not, basically. So this means that now we have the ability to say, hey, for this particular registry, whether something's a top-level package or a dependency of a top-level package, use these credentials to pull. So that kind of partially unblocks this sort of, hey, I want to sort of imagine you pushing all of provider family AWS to a private repo, right? What's going to happen is you're going to try and your package manager is going to try and pull like provider AWS 3, and then it's going to have a dependency on provider family AWS. So now, previously, the dependency on provider family AWS, there was no way to give it credentials to authenticate to that private registry, so it wouldn't pull successfully. Now there is with Hasan's design, but the problem that we come up on is packages typically have what I would call a fully qualified dependency. So even if you mirror all of your packages to an internal registry, the top level package that you install, let's say provider AWS S3, specifically says, I depend on xpackage.upbound.io/crossplane contrib/blah. So it's not going to try and pull it from your internal registry. It's going to try and pull it from upstream, right? So there's workarounds for this, which is that you like manually go and install all the dependencies, and then tell the parent to not try and automatically install its dependencies, but that's a little bit laborious. So that's one thing that we're trying to fix. This design actually is almost two designs for two very like closely related problems. The other problem that we don't have too much tracking of, but it is a real thing that we've seen and we expect to happen again in future, is moving packages. So this is basically you change a package, you move it to a different repository, or quintessential example is Upbound has a bunch of provider families that are in xpackage.upbound.io/upbound/provider AWS S3. And we actually donated those to the Crossplane contrib org, so they're now part of Crossplane, but we haven't been able to move the actual registry packages because that would potentially break people. Because we could sort of just say, okay, after this version, it stops being the Upbound org, it starts being the Crossplane contrib org. But the package manager doesn't know that it can upgrade from one org to the other. It considers those to be different packages because they're uniquely identified by their full registry stream. So the other side of this design is basically adding something. The idea is to add something similar to like Debian's replaces stanza. So you could basically say, hey, this package just replaces this other one. So it tells the package manager, if you see someone installing this package, it should replace this other package. It's effectively a continuation of that. It's not a different package. It's the same thing with a different name. Because we actually there'll be more details about this really soon, but Upbound wants to move some packages around and we don't want this to be a break and change for people. So we want to get this, in for the next version of Crossplane, and we likely are going to want to backport this, which is quite unconventional because it is a feature. We don't typically backport features, but just to help the Crossplane community out and make sure we don't disrupt people, we probably are going to want to backport at least the replaces stanza, so that when Upbound moves packages around, people can not be disrupted by it. And given that our feature freeze is pretty soon. My hope is that maybe we just get the replaces bit merged and we'll like defer the other part of this design maybe until the implementation of this until like after the release of something. But we'll see. I'll get as much as I get done. Get as much as I can get done before we cut the release. Does that make sense to folks?
Yeah, Nick, I think it's actually really helpful to kind of frame this around the various scenarios that this solves, both ones that have plagued the community for a while, and then ones that are not as common, but can be happening in the future. So I think that's really, really useful, and I'm excited to see this come together. And we'll have to see like what sort of support we can give for reviews and stuff to make sure this landing quality too.
Yeah.
I think in some cases it might also be sufficient to inform people just about administrative processes. Like for instance, we could say, if you are in a private repo, turn dependency management off and explicitly install the family provider.
Yeah, we say that today, and people don't like it. So it's well, actually, if you go look at the issue, there is one or two people who are like, oh, I do like that. It's more explicit. But then there are other people who are like, oh, this is a pain in the bum, especially if you've got lots and lots of providers that you need to go and do that for. It's can be quite onerous. So I think giving them the option to have it happen automatically is nice to have.
Yep.
And for what it's worth, like I opened this pull request literally like as I left work last night and just started half paying attention to it again now during this meeting. So I know that like Ezgi and Hasan have given some feedback. I haven't even had a chance to like proofread it for grammar errors yet. So it's really fresh.
Right on, Nick. Thank you for sharing that. All right, so there's a whole lot of momentum, velocity, and efforts around the package manager, package dependencies, all that sort of stuff during the 1.18 milestone here. So Hasan, I wanted to turn it over to you as well to kind of give us a deeper dive or an explanation of this new ImageConfig API and how that works and what that's going to be enabling. If do you want to share your screen, Hasan, or do you want me to just kind of click on and show stuff?
Yeah, I can share my screen, and
Okay,
I'm
stop.
also planning to make a quick demo. Okay, so yeah, so recently we proposed a new API called ImageConfig under package.crossplane.io API group. And this new API actually allows making image-centric configurations, which we have been lacking in Crossplane. So like there are a couple of like known use cases, and there are some like possible or anticipated use cases how this API could be helpful. But roughly the two known use cases are like providing authentication credentials or pull secrets for private packages. And the other one is providing signature verification configuration. So today, when you want to install a private package, you can pass the pull secret through the package installation API. So like in the provider API, for example, you can pass like spec.package pull secret ref, I guess. But what was lacking is like if the dependence or the dependency is a private package, then we didn't really have a like good solution for that. We have a workaround, like you can patch Crossplane core service account with the pull secret, and then Crossplane will be able to use that. But this is not ideal because the patch you made on the service account will be overridden when Crossplane is upgraded, or like if you want to do it properly through Helm interface, then you need to reinstall Crossplane, etc. So long story short, we introduced this API, and how it works is like you need to provide some rules to match some images, and we only support prefixes right now. And for example, in this case, this will match this image exactly, or the images starting with this one. This is pretty similar to what registry's conf is doing to match images. And once an image is matched, then you can provide a registry configuration, or soon you will be able to provide a signature verification configuration. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. So I would like to also do a quick demo right now. So I have the latest Crossplane installed, and right now I don't have any package installed. And now I will install a package, which is also the one that we are using in the end-to-end test. So it is a configuration package, and it depends on a provider, which is a private one. So first I will deploy without providing the authentication information, and we will see that it is actually failing when it is trying to pull the credentials. Unfortunately, we don't have we are not propagating this error properly because we haven't had events or conditions on the lock object, which is responsible for resolving dependencies. But Ezgi is working on adding the first event, so we can extend it further to expose this information as well. But the story is right now the package manager cannot resolve the dependency because authentication is required to communicate with this configuration. So what I will do right now is I will deploy this image config, matching the provider, the private provider, and it is referring to a pool secret. And let me first create the pool secret, and then create the image config. And yeah, you can see immediately after I deploy the image config, the provider dependency is resolved, and the package manager deployed provider, and the provider itself is installed and become ready, which means its deployment is also able to pull its private image. And I think in a short sec file, the top level configuration will also be ready because all of its dependencies are resolved now. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for me.
And Hasan, you said there's more work coming to do verification as well as part of this API?
Yes, yeah, that's true. Verification is also part of this API. So right now I'm working on this part of the API. So hopefully soon we will be able to specify signature verification. So there are more details on the shape of the API and the plan, how we implement it, etc. in the design doc for those who are interested.
Awesome. Thanks for showing that off, Hasan. I think that's definitely helpful for folks that have been running into these type of issues for quite a while as well. So this is quite nice. Markus, did you have something you want to say too?
Yeah, I had a question related to the names of functions as they are installed by the package manager versus the name that is in the manifest in the marketplace. But I saw Nick's answer to that. There are no plans to align them. But I came across that. It's actually so if you're just playing around, you go to the marketplace, you install the function, you have your composition, and then later on you have a configuration package, you bundle everything up, install the configuration package, and then a package manager uses the different name prepended with the org, right? Crossplane contrib dash function dash so and so, and then you're like, oh, I needed to go back and change all the names of all the functions in my composition.
Yeah,
It's fine, but it's it's a little bit of an inconvenience.
I was being maybe a little sarcastic with my response. I do understand the problem, but if the specific question is, do we have plans to do anything about the problem? There are no plans right now. Maybe there should be, but we haven't got like a tracking issue or anything like that. No one's really been thinking about it. While looking at the recent, while looking at this design actually that I've opened up, it got me thinking about identity of packages more broadly. And there is, I'm not sure how this would work, but like once we get a bit more breathing room after the release and KubeCon and whatnot, I think it might be worth some stepping back a little bit and thinking about how the package manager identifies packages, right? It was interesting when we were talking about this problem, Bassam assumed, for example, that packages are just uniquely identified by like the name in the package metadata. So when you have a Crossplane.yaml file for a provider, if it says I'm provider AWS, then I think he was assuming that, well, that's the unique identifier, right? But it's not really. You could have provider AWS in one GitHub org, and you could have another provider named provider AWS in another GitHub org. It's especially true with functions, right? It's hard to sort of guarantee a unique name there. So we have this interesting thing where the most unique thing that can identify a package is its full registry URL, right? With like registry org, et cetera, et cetera. But then if you like mirror that package to another org, it's the same package, but it has a different full registry URL. But then there's no guarantee that that's the same. They could have, they could have like the same org and what's the name? Org and repository names with different registries and actually be different packages. So I think this might be worth us like stepping back and thinking about what is the identity of these things. For fun fact, the package manager in its very first version didn't used to install packages as like org plus repo name. It wasn't crossplane contrib / function foo or whatever. And then we noticed that there were conflicts. It would just install things as like provider AWS. And then if there was a community provider AWS and like an object provider AWS in different orgs, it would think they were the same package and it would fight. So Dan was like, oh crap, and just put the org in as a bit of a differentiator. But even then it's, it's not perfect. So I kind of feel like this maybe needs some thought. I don't know how we would change it without a breaking change. But
the scenario I ran into recently was I installed function patchline transform version 07. I had a composition, played around with that, and then I installed platform ref AWS. Well, in platform ref AWS has a pinned version of function patchline transform to 040, which it tried to install. So now the package manager said, wait a second, you already have a function patchline transform, right? And so it had a lock there. So I had to decide which one do I want to use. Do I want to delete the old one and my previous composition doesn't work? Or do I want to use the new one or old one, right? So basically what I did was I deleted the old function, kept the new one, went back into the composition, updated the references, and then reapplied it. And then I could have platform ref AWS and the other compositions coexist. But it was a little bit, was an interesting workflow.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if this would help in that scenario, but Ezgi has a pull request open that does change the behavior. So today, if we install a package and it has a dependency and that dependency is not installed, then we will install that dependency, or we'll try at least. But if we see a package and it has a dependency and that dependency seems to be already installed, but it's not like the right version, like it's not new enough or something like that, we won't do anything about it. We'll just sort of say, well, sorry, you said you wanted this, you have a dependency of provider family AWS, that's installed, but it's the wrong version. So error, we don't do anything, right? So Ezgi, I believe, is working on a pull request that will actually attempt to upgrade those packages or do something to upgrade basically those packages to satisfy the version constraint.
And I believe, Nick, that's actually the next agenda item as well.
Well, I won't go too far into it then, but I will say that you can imagine that a lot of the time when I think of dependencies, I think of like a software project like Go or something like that, right? Where you're doing this sort of dependency solving. And then you have the option of like, if your dependencies go all wonky and things don't work, you just git reset minus hard and you have a working software project again, right? but we are a control plane, and if your dependency upgrades and it's a bad, it's got a bug or whatever, or like there was a breaking change and it dropped some managed resource or whatever, then it's really bad. So we're incentivized to be a lot more conservative about how our dependencies work, because there's just not an easy rollback most of the time, or a lot of the time.
Nick, I think maybe you're already aware, but the problem that Markus is describing, more specific to functions, because how we rely on the function name in the composition. I think you are already aware of this, in the early days. So I'm wondering, not on the package manager side or on the package installation side, but on the composition side, where we are referencing to functions. Could we do some improvements, instead of referencing functions with their names, if we could reference functions with their, I don't know, repo identifiers or the package repo URL, whatever, and then in the composition controller we resolve that reference to the actual function name, then I think part of the problem that Markus is describing could be solved. So in that case, you can install any function with any name as long as you reference it with xpackage-up.io/patch and transform.
Yeah, I missed that. Is there an issue tracking this?
I don't know. I remember this discussion.
Possibly, Nick.
Yeah.
I think there might have been a really old issue. I think we discussed this similar a couple months ago, but I'd have to take a look back.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is this wasn't really on my radar, and step one for getting on the radar is let's write up an issue that tracks what the problem is, and then we can sort of go from there to see what our options are and what the urgency is to fix it.
Cool. That sounds like a good idea to me. So let's keep on moving then to keep time in the agenda here. Ezgi, do you want to go ahead and give us a little bit more details about the work you're doing, and do you want to share your screen to show anything off there too?
Yeah, I wanna share my screen. Let me just share it. Okay, so as we had discussed recently, there was an issue about updating dependency versions. So before talking about that, I'd like to quickly go through how Package Manager currently works. So we have 3 different controllers inside Package Manager concept. We have package controller, we have package revision controller, and resolver. I might also refer it as lock controller. So all these 3 controllers are more or less communicating with an object called lock, and it's a singleton object created by Crossplane, and we are storing packages and their dependencies and the constraints inside this lock object. So if you follow these red numbers, you can see how Package Manager actually works. So whenever a user installs a package controller reconciles on it, creates a package revision for that specific package, and package revision controller reconciles on that package revision, updates the lock object, and resolver or the lock controller reconciles on that lock object, notices that there are some dependencies which are not installed on the cluster, and creates those dependent packages, package B and C. And again, package controller reconciles on them, package revisions are created, reconciled again. If there are further dependencies coming from these 2 packages, those will be added to the lock, and the cycle goes through. The issue happens when we decide to update the package A's version. For example, if we decide to update package A to the next version, which also bumps package B's version, then the package manager does basically nothing. It says that, okay, there's a new constraint coming up. I don't satisfy it. You have this version installed on your cluster, and that's it. Together with this change, we are solving this issue. At the beginning, we first thought that, okay, if we can find a valid constraint which satisfies all of these, then we are just gonna start using that version, even though if it's a downgrade. But after getting some reviews and further discussion, We decided not to go with that path, so downgrades are not allowed in this PR. Also, if we decide to update a package dependency, we are not installing the latest valid version, but we are just gonna find the minimum available version which satisfies all the constraints available on the log file. So I'm gonna do a small demo. So let me first install a provider-nop package. So I have installed my cool provider-nop package, which is basically a Crossplane country provider-nop package with version 0.20. And I'm gonna install another configuration which depends on that provider. So let me first show you the package content. This is the package I'm gonna install, and this package is depending on two different packages. The first one is provider-nop with this constraint, which we currently satisfied already. And the second one is another configuration, again depending on provider-nop, but this time with a different constraint. We are requesting minimum 0.2.1. So before this change, package manager would be just complain about it, but now we should expect to have an upgrade on the provider-nop to this version.
I like that, Ezgi. The previous behavior is package manager would complain.
Yes.
We could do better than that, it looks like.
So as you can see, the first thing you may notice is even though my provider name is not with the convention, according to the convention, even though it's a random string, the package manager realizes that this is the same package that we depend on, and it updates that specific package to the minimum valid version. We have provided provider-nop v030 as well, but we are version, we are finding the minimum valid version and we are upgrading to that. So yeah, I think this will help all these dependency manager complications a little bit. This new functionality is behind a feature flag, so we are not enabling it by default, but if you guys want to explore it a little bit, you can enable the flag through help. Yeah, that was all.
That's awesome, Ezgi. I think that's fantastic to just see it live. You know, like that's been a chronic problem for us, right? Especially as providers have rapidly matured and you know, increased their versions. Is that folks, you know, if they're bringing you in through dependency, they would still end up with the quite an old one that just never really got updated, right? It just kind of went a little stale. So this is really nice to kind of keep things up to date, but in, you know, in accordance with what the versions, specifically listed version constraints are too.
Just out of curiosity for my edification, where would those warnings or errors get surfaced in the past? I know it's not maybe less of an issue now.
Do you mean complaints, Jacob?
Yeah, like would these be like would these show up as like kubectl events, or would they you know, if you're applying the resource, would you get like basically warnings directly from kubectl apply? There's like a facility with like admission controllers to do that, to like inject warnings and errors when you're creating and updating the resource, but yeah.
So before the events were published to the package revisions, so if you go there, you can see that, okay, there is a missing dependency error. But with this change, we are also started to send some events, record some events on the lock object as well. And if you need to downgrade the package manually, you will see that on the lock events. If there is no valid constraints available, then you will see that error message also in the log. Also, as always, Crossplane's debug logs are quite helpful, but they're too deep.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Ezgi, for showing that off. And then two quick thoughts. One is that, and we shouldn't discuss it now because we're getting out of time, and then Jacob had an agenda item too. But one thing I was thinking is that a natural place, at least for humans to look for errors or events or whatever, is on the packages themselves, right? Oftentimes people don't even know to look for in the package revisions for specific information, and most people don't know about the lock either. So I wonder if at some point, if it makes sense to align with what humans expect to, hey, I installed this package and something's wrong, showing, bubbling that information up to the package itself, which is a natural place for them to look. So just keep that in our minds for the future. And then the other thing is that, there is a bunch of activity in the package manager right now, right? Hasan's in there, Ezgi's in there. You're showing us off really super cool stuff. Nick is getting in there with this design as well too. So my one request would be that, a lot of work is going on there. There's a lot of churn. So let's be very careful then with, potential regressions and, quality of the stuff we're merging and critical eye on all this stuff, because there's a lot of stuff changing. So I know this team is very capable of doing that, but that's the request as well.
Yeah, definitely. The package manager code is quite complex. As I mentioned, there are 3 controllers working together. Just syncing those 3 is also a complicated thing. And yeah, that's why we are quite careful and conservative about the changes we are doing.
Yep, that's awesome, Ezgi. And that diagram, I was just thinking to myself while you were showing it, I was like, oh my gosh, goodness, this really actually helps me understand a bit more about what the package manager is doing under the covers. So that was quite helpful, Ezgi. All right, Jacob, do you want to go ahead and talk through your agenda item here too?
Yeah, totally. Thanks for humoring me on this discussion. I'm pretty new to like the whole Crossplane ecosystem at the moment. So one of our teams basically want to go and create an instance of the resource definitions that we're providing programmatically. So they've got like a Golang controller where they're doing this. My kind of impression is like a lot of the resource creation through like kubectl and all that was like pretty mature, right? I can go and define an XRD and have a composition around it and like kubectl apply like some YAML. That is all great. But in this case, what I kind of want to be able to offer that team is a set of like client bindings for Kubernetes client Go, that whole ecosystem. Because my impression is in lieu of offering those bindings, they're going to have to use some of the raw APIs to interact with these CRDs directly and like deal with map struct interfaces that they have to typecast. So this isn't a Crossplane problem per se. I just like imagine any kind of custom resource that's out there. Like if they're not providing bindings themselves, like one would have to author their own bindings. I think maybe Crossplane is unique here in that it gives you this no-code approach to defining your XRDs, so you can kind of skip all of the kube controller gen stuff. And now I'm finding that maybe I'm going to miss that. It's like I want to give some kind of tool like the XRD we've defined in like YAML, and then I want to get back some Golang packages that basically offer like versioned interfaces for the like developers to interact with if they decide to use client Go. So I'm wondering if there's any prior art. I did start a discussion and I noticed that there's this thing called, I forget what it was called, but there is some package out there that basically you would define your XRDs using like Golang first, and then it would use some kind of like controller gen like shenanigans to go and like generate your resulting like XRDs. That feels a little bit brittle to me. The project only has like 6 GitHub stars, and I actually don't want to start with Golang first. I want to use the paved road approach, which to me feels like define it in YAML, then generate bindings from the YAML definitions. But anyway, a bit long-winded. I'm wondering if there's like prior art around this, if this has ever come up in the past.
Yeah, I got a couple ideas here, but Nick, is there? Do you want to address this by any chance with some of the other thinking you've been doing?
Sorry, I wasn't paying attention at all. I'm trying to get this design doc.
Cool. So yeah, let me take a stab then. So Jacob, I think you've got some good instincts here, and this is definitely something that has come up before, right? So I think it's something that's maybe unique-ish here is that, a lot of there's a bit of a gap, I think, that you identified yourself between the definition of your own platform abstraction, your own composite resource definition, like the means through which you define that, and then like dynamically at runtime, how Crossplane taking that and then on the fly generating CRDs and generating those types in the Kubernetes API server, right? So it's not like a simple, hey, at compile time statically, like we've got the CRDs that are already there. there, you've got, client Go bindings and stuff generated there. So like there's a bit of a gap, right? That kind of makes it a bit of a unique problem, which you identified. So that's kind of an interesting thing. And then, so I do not know of like, this is the way that people do this. This is the solved problem. This is, the way to do it, the prior art, the golden path. I don't have an answer for that, but maybe you've already seen this before too, but there are some fairly nice convenience mechanisms, like the Crossplane, I think maybe it's in the runtime, maybe it's in the SDK, I'm not sure, but that offers like means to work with unstructured objects. So you don't just do like a map struct interface, the interface nonsense. It's, you could do more. You're still, it's still not a statically compiled strong type sort of thing, but there's convenience methods for accessing fields and setting things and stuff like that that may make it a little bit easier. So if you've looked at the unstructured library that's offered in either the runtime or the Go SDK that's used in a lot of functions, that could be helpful here. And Nick, maybe with that ramble here from me, that might accelerate your ability to give a deeper answer.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, unstructured is ultimately a map string interface just with a shooter on top of it, getters and setters and whatnot. I don't think I have anything particularly useful to say here, unfortunately. There isn't much in the way of like active plans or thinking for the Go SDK right now. I can say that taking off my Crossplane hat and putting on my Upbound hat for a moment. There is a team within Upbound that has been working on developer experience, especially around function authoring and kind of writing compositions in languages like Python, Go, or KCL, all that kind of stuff. So we are going to be announcing some pretty cool stuff at KubeCon. Upbound will be that is related to this kind of stuff. There won't be much for Go though. We've been focusing on some other languages that like Python and stuff like that to start with, but Go is kind of on the radar. So this could be something that some of Upbound's kind of developer experience tooling might help with sometime soon.
Gotcha. Yeah, like I'm looking into my crystal ball, right? And it like Crossplane makes it so easy to go and like modify your XRDs and generate like V1 alpha 2, alpha 3, and so on. And I'm just picturing the like development team that might be creating these custom bindings. So let's say they write their bespoke bindings because they're not getting generated for them. They're going to have trouble keeping up, and like a kind of mixed blessing of Crossplane making it so easy to like author these custom resources as they might be moving a little bit more quickly. So I don't want to get into this game where like we update a resource and like all of their code breaks and they have to go and like regenerate their bindings themselves. Maybe that's not as labor intensive as I see it becoming, but yeah, some kind of code gen would be like quite welcome here to make sure that like the things stay aligned and they evolve in lockstep.
Yeah, that is it's not announced yet, so I can't go into too much detail, but then that is something that's very similar to what we're thinking of with the DevX work at Upbound. If you wanted to, by the way, well, actually, I'll reach out to you separately because this is getting into plugging Upbound stuff rather than Crossplane stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Jacob. That's definitely an interesting scenario that I think is not entirely unique to your needs, man. Sweet. All right. So we are out of time and also out of agenda items. So well-managed time today, folks. A lot of stuff that we went through today. And, as I mentioned before, the 1.18 release is expected before the next community meeting, and the KubeCon Salt Lake City event will be before the next community meeting as well. So a whole lot of stuff going on, a whole lot of stuff to do. Thanks for everybody's efforts and help, and then coming out and chatting today, and then hope to see as many people as possible in Salt Lake City too. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. See y'all.
Bye.